In this week's In-Ear Insights, we have a technology adjacent problem within business. I had a chance to talk to a bunch of CEOs recently, and they all had the same general feedback, which is, hey, our employees are using generative AI at work, and we don't know how to stop them from doing that, knowing that there are risks to these technologies. And I remember listening to them and saying to myself, this is the smartphone all over again. It's 2007. People are bringing their iPhones to work and you have no control over it, right? This is 2008 and employees using Twitter, and back when Twitter was useful. And Twitter is not something that your company controls. And what do you do about it? Katie, when you think back at all the technological innovations that have happened, from these lovely supercomputers that we have in our pockets to generative AI, what do you say to your fellow CEOs when they're like, we can't control this? Like, how do we control this?
It's funny. It's not even a technology problem. I take it back even farther than that, of just general human interaction at work that has nothing to do with work. That's like saying, hey, Chris, you and I are never allowed to talk about anything unless it moves the business forward. And it's just an unrealistic dictatorship expectation to put on your workforce. And that's not a culture that's going to survive very long. And so it really comes down to the inevitable. It's going to happen, but can you put guardrails around it? And so you brought this up to me earlier, and my first thought was, oh, this is social media and Facebook all over again. How do I keep people from using their personal Facebook profiles during work hours? It's, The Office had a whole episode about, time theft. And it's like, are you sneezing? Are you breathing? Well, that's not working. So let me mark you down and strike against you that you're not actually doing something to move the company forward. And this is that all over again. And so, yes, there are some higher risks with generative AI, because now you're in the, well, it can do my work for me. It can write for me versus, Facebook, where you're just, stalking all the people you dated in high school, which, you're not necessarily, you know, using that to do your job for you unless you work for, a PI company or something like that. So, what I would say to my peers, to other managers who are concerned about the use of technology in the workplace that isn't for work related things, is that it's going to happen. You need to acknowledge it. You can't stop it, but you can put guardrails around it. And I think that, Chris, that's what we should really focus on.
What about people who are, to your point, they're using it to do work, to do their job, and for example, one of the risks of generative AI when you're using it with third-party software, like, for example, ChatGPT, is that you are handing off some of your proprietary information potentially to these services. So from that perspective, I mean, yeah, we acknowledge people are going
Sure.
to not work at 100% utilization for 8 hours a day. That's just humans.
Right.
In the context of, hey, I know there are risks with these tools. I know that there are copyright risks. There are intellectual property confidentiality risks. What do you say to the executives there to say, like, okay, well, because again, to your point, it's gonna happen. How do
Mhm.
you put guardrails on that?
So this is from, we often talk about governance and data governance and business governance and just general process. This is where those terms come in. And so knowing that you can't stop generative AI from happening and evolving and being incorporated into, so even if your company isn't using Chat GPT, there's a lot of tools that you are using that are incorporating generative AI, such as Microsoft and Bing, and the list goes on and on and on. So you can't stop it from that point. So what you need to do is have an understanding of your intellectual property, have an understanding of your copyright. And if you're dealing with protected health information, for example, if you're dealing with PII, if you're dealing with, you know, copyrighted information, it is then, incumbent upon you to say, okay, we know people are going to use this. How do we, leadership, provide a secure space for our employees to use this? Maybe it's, on a intranet, very internal, doesn't reach the external world. Maybe it's on a secured server. Maybe this is the process. Maybe we give them a checklist of things they can and can't put into generative AI systems. Like you can search for this on, Google in incognito mode. You can't search for this on Google publicly, whatever those rules look like. But that's where you need to start is acknowledging, yes, this is a thing. And now here's what this means as a risk to the company. Because if the employees don't understand that there's an actual risk, a data breach, a copyright breach, any sort of liability, then what do they care? All they hear is no, 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 which makes them want to do it even more. But your job is to help them understand why the answer is no.
So this is not a problem for Trust Insights.
No.
But I could totally see this being a problem at our last company. You'd have an account coordinator or an account executive who's like, you don't pay me enough to care. I don't care about this stuff. I just got to get my work done. And if I don't have to be at the office till 8 p.m., I'm going to use ChatGPT all damn day. And you can't do anything about it unless you catch me. How do you manage that?
And, it's funny because a lot of what I've been talking about at the conferences, at MADS, I'll be talking about at B2B, is that we can't forget that at the end of this, behind the curtain are people, and people still need to be managed. And so that's a culture problem. That's not a risk of ChatGPT. That's the risk of using the ChatGPT system is a side effect of a larger issue, which is you have disgruntled, burnt out junior staff that you're making stay until 8 o'clock to do repetitive, unfulfilling work. That's what needs to be managed, not them putting things into ChatGPT, which is going to be a risk. Yes, that's a problem, but it's not really the thing that you need to solve for. So the first thing you need to solve for is why is your account coordinator staying until 8 o'clock? What are the things that they're doing that are making them stay until 8 o'clock? And are there better ways to do the thing? And maybe ChatGPT is the answer. So what would it look like to bring that person into creating a solution so that they can take some ownership of it and not have to stay until 8 o'clock?
That requires management to be aware of and empathetic to the problems that the staff are having, which
It sure does.
which in a lot of cases is not the case. And there are technological solutions that will act as a band-aid, running private servers and stuff, all those things, running it ChatGPT through Azure instance, but it doesn't fix the root problem.
Oh, it absolutely does not. And so this is, and I don't want to, go too far off topic, but ChatGPT is just another technology that people are going to use as a band-aid to slap on top of their management problems, their people problems. And so, you're sort of split down the middle of leadership saying, oh my God, everybody's going to leave because ChatGPT can do the work. And then you have the other half saying, good, let them leave. ChatGPT can do the work. So it really depends on what side of that conversation you fall on. If you fall on the side of, oh my God, everybody's going to leave, then you're probably looking to fix some of the culture issues, some of the overall like disgruntled, burnt out, how do we help versus the great, let them leave. You're not going to solve that problem. It is going to perpetuate and can keep being a problem if that's your attitude, if people are just replaceable, if they are just cogs in the machine and you're just sitting on top of all of it.
For someone who works in that environment, maybe a senior executive, maybe you're not the one in charge, but you are report to the one in charge. Is your option then just to leave and find a better company to work for?
It is. That's one of your options. That is always one of your options. I personally, I know this will come as a shock. I'm stubborn and I'm a fighter. And if I was not the person who had the authority to fix the thing, I would be making a lot of noise about the thing that needs to be fixed. And Chris, you've seen this firsthand.
Yes, I have.
And so I personally, and this is just me personally, I personally feel like it is my responsibility to, within reason, highlight, here are the problems, here are some solutions that I would recommend. Maybe they're not the solution, but it'll get people thinking. And I feel like I personally would want to at least explore that option. And if once I've exhausted that, then I'm like, okay, I've tried everything I can do to resolve this within my authority, within my responsibility, respectfully, legally, et cetera, et cetera. There's nothing else I can now do. Now I'm going to leave. And, because at some point, like people like me who are fixers, we have our limits too. You get burnt out of trying to fix something that nobody else cares about. And so that's when you say, okay, now it's time to leave. And so, yes, the option of picking up your things and walking out the door is absolutely an option. And that's an okay option. There's nothing wrong with that option. It comes down to your own personal choice of how far do I want to take it. And when you're dealing with people problems, people are complicated and a lot of it is out of your control. And Chris, I can't just come to you and say, we're going to do it this way because I said so. That's not going to work. And I can't also just come to you and say, well, I'm the boss and you can't question me. I can do all of those things, but I already know from, history that that's not going to get us very far. I also can't just say, well, whatever you think is best, just like do whatever you want. Like there has to be some in between. And that takes a lot of hard work. And that is work that people are not willing to do. People are not willing to do the work to manage the people properly. They want to delegate it to the machines. And that's where you see systems like ChatGPT coming in. And so to the original question of how do I prevent people from using systems like ChatGPT to, come into my company, come into my culture to do the work? You can't. You have to spend your time on the people management. And that's the place people don't want to spend their time. They want the quick wins, the fast money, the instant results, the gratification, and people management is not that.
So I'm guessing I already know the answer, and if you are the consistent listener of the show, you know the answer as well. But what does the roadmap to safe AI adoption look like for the worried CEO?
You definitely want to start with the 5 Ps. The 5P framework is purpose, people, process, platform, and performance. And you want to focus a lot on the first 2 Ps, purpose and people. The problem with a lot of companies is that they see what's potential with performance and then they work backwards. If they're like, okay, I want to increase my revenue by 5 million. Let's bring in ChatGPT. Okay, those are 2 of the Ps, but those are the 2 Ps you focus on last. You first need to say, what is the problem I'm trying to solve? What is the point? Why are we bringing in ChatGPT in the first place? And who on my team, internally, externally, customers, stakeholders, investors, all the way down to, the people who, make sure that the floors are cleaned every night. Who needs to be involved with introducing a new technology? Who needs to be involved with helping us reach those goals? And then you can figure out, okay, what does the process look like for each of these individuals? What platforms? Some of them may be using ChatGPT. Some of them may not be using ChatGPT. Some of them may just be analyzing data or communicating with customers or answering the phones when someone calls and say, hey, why is your content suddenly gone downhill? Are you using ChatGPT to generate it? There's a lot of different things to factor in. That's how you want to introduce ChatGPT appropriately, professionally. You also want to factor in things like, hey, what kind of data are we going to allow into these systems? We know people are going to use these systems. What can we say about the data that we have? So for example, Chris, we know that you can import Google Analytics data into ChatGPT, for example, and have it do an analysis. You as leadership need to decide, is that okay? Because if your ChatGPT system is not centralized on your own private servers, you're putting your Google Analytics data into the entire ChatGPT ecosystem for anyone to access. Now, someone's not going to say, hey, give me Trust Insights GA4 data, and they'll just get an exact replica yet. And those are the things that we need to be aware of. So, as you're going through the 5P process, you need to be aware of what data are we going to allow into these systems and what won't we allow. That's the work that needs to be done first.
Got it. Okay. So it sounds like the almost like we need to ask people on a task basis, kind of what tasks they have, what their user stories are.
Absolutely. And so my user story is going to be very different, Chris, from your user story. And so my user story, sort of back up for those who aren't familiar, a user story is a simple sentence composed of 3 parts. As a persona, I want to, so that. The persona is the audience, the want to is the action, and the so that is the intent. And so my user story could be, as the CEO, I want to introduce ChatGPT so that my processes are more efficient and I can save money. Pretty straightforward. Chris, what would your user story be?
Well, let me give you a real simple tactical one, because I feel, and this is something that's going to be in this week's Trust Insights newsletter. We have a tendency to try and go for like the whole enchilada instead of just a bean at a time, and so this is an example of a bean. As a reporting analyst, because that's the role I'm playing when we do monthly reporting, I want to find and replace all references from last month in my reports, so I don't have to open up each individual PowerPoint presentation, manually edit it, and waste an hour of time every month on this task that clearly should be automated, but I don't know how to do it. And yet I know it exists. I know that like the programming language Python can do it. I'm just going to ask, I want to ask a ChatGPT, how do you do this? Can you write the code for me? So that's my user story for a very, very simple but useful implementation.
And it's interesting because that never would have occurred to me as a user story, as a way to use the system. But by going through that exercise of a user story, I'm like, oh, okay, that's how my analyst is going to want to use the system. That's how, my comms person, that's how my marketing person, because everyone's going to want to use it a little bit differently. We may all have the same goal, which is to more efficiently deliver client reports, but we all play a different role in creating those reports. And so utilizing user stories to understand how people are going to want to use a system like ChatGPT is a really great communication tool. So then you as leadership can say, okay, now I understand why people are wanting to use this. It's not just to be lazy and, get rid of things. Like the time savings of you having the system change the dates and reports is going to be cumulative. It's going to add up. You're going to be like, oh, if I can do this here, can I also do this here? Can I also do this here? And then you're going to find yourself with all of this extra time to actually do deep, valuable analysis, make insights, turn those insights into action plans, turn those action plans into strategies, turn those strategies into revenue. And so you'll start to see the ripple effect of it that way as well.
Exactly. So I mean, that's kind of where I think if CEOs had the level of insight to say like, okay, this is just an example of a task that clearly a machine should be doing, they would understand, okay, there's very little risk here, right? Okay, that this is going to be generating a piece of Python code that will run on someone's laptop and do a very simple operation, and yet that will save an hour a month. Now, if you have a team of 10 analysts, now it's 10 hours a month. That's 120 hours a year. If you were an agency, that's 120 extra potential billable hours you could have for those 10 analysts. So that's, that I think would probably help those CEOs say, okay, I can see now the business case for doing this. That's a low risk endeavor.
Mhm.
It is, there's high return, right? Because it's saving time, when time is our most valuable asset that we can't buy any more of. And so, okay, so let's maybe approve the usage of a chat GPT in this type of use case.
And I think that that's really what it comes down to is you can either embrace it or you can fight against it. But fighting against it, especially a system that is getting, integrated into so many different things is going to be
Mhm.
really difficult. And so what would it look like for your company to embrace it and just have those open conversations, with your team, with your company? Hey, we're all excited about ChatGPT. What does this look like for us? We know that there's value to it and we're still learning. So help us learn together versus just, throwing down the gauntlet and saying, no, you can't do this because it's going to make people want to do it even more. Well, what is it about it that I can't do? I know for
Mhm.
a fact, Chris, if I said, Chris, you can't do that. You can't use ChatGPT. You'd be like, oh yeah, watch me. It's like when I was 5 and my dad said, "You can't climb that tree." In my head, I took it as a challenge and I climbed the tree and I absolutely fell out and broke my elbow. What he should have said is, "I don't want you to climb that tree because you may fall out and break a bone." And I would have been like, "Oh, okay." But he said, "You can't." And I said, "Got it. I'm going to do it. I'll show you. I'll prove you wrong." And it really comes down to that, being clear with your communication.
Exactly. If you have examples of the kinds of discussions you're having with your team, your leadership, or you are in leadership and you're having struggling to communicate your expectations about AI, and you want to share your experiences, pop on by our free Slack group. Go to trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers, where you and over 3,500 other marketers are asking and answering each other's questions every single day. And wherever it is that you watch or listen to the show, if there's a channel you'd rather have it on instead, go to trustinsights.ai/TI podcast and find on the service of your choice. And while you're there, please leave us a rating and a review. It does help share the show. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time.